Uncovering India. As we all know, from last couple of years, China has been showing its belligerent self, be it creating ruckus at Doklam or inflicting casualties on our soldiers at Galwan last year, or investing across all the neighboring countries and taking over their infrastructure and assets, like investing in ports. The recent incident being the Hambantota port of Sri Lanka in Colombo becoming a colony of China. So, in this scenario, what is the geopolitical and security strategic threats that we can face from this belligerent China surrounding us from all sides? And to speak about that, we have two very noted army veterans. We have with us Colonel Dixit, Mithilesh Dixit, and Colonel Manjit Singh, who have Colonel Dixit has not only served in the Indian Army but also is currently working in China and has a bird's eye view from both the sides what's happening in India and China. Colonel Manjit has served in the IPKF in Sri Lanka against the LTTE and knows what goes on in Sri Lanka. So we have two very different but very interesting point of views coming up. So we start with you, Colonel Dixit. Welcome to this session of Uncovering India. What do you make out of this entire thing, developments that are happening around our borders in the Himalayan eastern front as well as in the coastal region, especially Sri Lanka? What do you make out of it?
Let's look at things at the global perspective at the moment after the end of Cold War, after NATO became less relevant as it was earlier. There is no Eastern Bloc. Probably a vacuum got created in the international geostrategic scenario, whether you look at it from the political point of view, diplomatic point of view, strategic or military point of view. And China was one of the developing powers post its economic development that started in 1978, right? And China stepped in more than any other country to fill up that vacuum, right? Now, every country looks at its own interest, whether they are economic, political, or military or strategic interest, when it gets into it, right? Definitely, it is not part of the Chinese policy to be non-aligned, or I mean, they are non-aligned, but they look at their own interest, right? And the economic interest give way to political interest, give way to geostrategic interest, and give way to making a country powerful in the world, right? We are also at a stage where probably there is no superpower who is in a position to directly militarily enter into a conflict with China to stop any of the ambitions that the country has. Now, if you look at the neighboring countries that we have where China is having these economic activities, whether it is Sri Lanka, whether it is Pakistan or Bangladesh, all these countries have had a historical and mythological association with India. And as things have grown during the British colonial region, the 8 geographical areas of all these countries were governed by the British rule, which was from New Delhi. And that Delhi still signifies, to some extent, that powerful domination of either you call it India today, the growing India, which probably makes many jealous in the world, right? So these countries had that axe to grind. Then they also had their personal economic interest. I mean, over the last 100 years, Sri Lanka has not been able to develop a port of the global significance. So when China stepped in to help, their obvious reaction was there. And they felt bitten in some way or the other during the reactions which were when they were facing LTTE and other problems in the country, right? The next thing happened is that when UNHRC issues happened in the global scenario, China was the first one to step up. Take the other example of Bangladesh. They have their own economic issues. They have their own union problems because of which they have not been able to progress Chittagong as a port. So when China stepped in economically and China stepped in with its professional and working discipline, Bangladesh came into it. And then we also have issues like Teen Biga corridor with Bangladesh. So probably there is something which was there to happen. Now, it strengthens Bangladesh position into the into the situation in Indian Ocean, and it also provides China a gateway into Indian Ocean for its Yunnan province, which is the southern province of China, right? Now, it not only gives the economic corridor, it gives a strategic corridor. Let's look at Pakistan. Pakistan had two ports, Ben Qasim and Karachi, both in close proximity to India. Tomorrow, if there is a military conflict, India is in a very safe position, very suitable position to block these at the initial beginning of any such conflict. So Pakistan, in addition to bringing economic development and easing down the internal conflict in Balochistan, they wanted to develop an alternative port for strategic military and economic methods. So these were three ambitions these countries had, whether they were strategic or economic, and China stepped in suitably with its economic development, with its condition, right? And it is fair enough to assume that probably in future, if there is a requirement, China will definitely use these areas to dominate the Indian Ocean, which by the synonymity of name India and Indian Ocean, we have always felt that our dominance in this particular region becomes quite natural. So now when all these things are happening, probably China is creating alternate positions, right? Starting with the economic, by the economic excuse, or probably you may say by reasons of economy, and then gradually develop using them strategically, right? Now, the reason for developing them into their own administrative regions is probably to have an unhinged, uninterfered use of that territory, economic, strategic, military, or whatever it is. And like we all know that 12 nautical miles south of Sri Lanka is the biggest shipping corridor. 275 ships go every day, right? And all these countries which are there, they know that as part of Monroe Doctrine, India will never be an aggressor to any country. India will never even interfere into internal affairs of any country, or India will not even get into a conflict, first strike conflict with any of these countries, right? So they know that. And they are also developing their relationships with China for the simple reason that they want to send a message to India, look, we also have an alternative. So every country is trying to grind its own axe. And like you rightly said in your introduction, it is not unsafe to presume. So probably under the circumstances, the best thing would be that we develop our own interests and we look at opportunities around us to make sure that tomorrow, if there is a situation, we are able to probably independently look after our own interests, because China has developed these pockets economically and strategically, which are an issue, but which are not such a major issue for any country to probably proactively interfere in these issues. I mean, America can criticize it, Russia can criticize it, some other countries can criticize it, but nobody will openly enter into a conflict with China, right? There may be diplomatic differences which will come on the fore. So these are small pockets which have been created, which will, when put together into a mosaic, will become a large and serious strategic issues, and which will give a serious and a major advantage to the country which is involved into it.
So what happens to the geosecurity scenario in the Indian Ocean region, especially for India? Because on one side, on eastern sector, we have Chittagong port where Bangladesh, then there's Myanmar, the entire, then which is the pathway to the Asia Pacific. And then on the other side is your, we were developing Iran's Gwadar port, now Chabahar port, now China, Iran has invited even China to invest in Chabahar port, and China is already investing into Pakistan's Gwadar port, which is very near to the Chabahar port. That means technically then the Arabian Sea is also now controlled by China. So east, west, south, all three sides in the pockets of China, which means
So
in
if
case
you
of a situation, security situation, our strategic interests are at threat, be it supply of petroleum or supply of essentials or movement of our cargo ships. So what happens
So
to this scenario?
if you remember, there was a time when people used to talk about Diego Garcia and all these, and the American influence of the on these small island states in these island regions in the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and this particular area. So probably over a period of time, it has happened that China has progressed with its economic and strategic interest in the Indian Ocean region, in the Southeast Asian region, and probably is very suitably poised for any economic initiative, for any strategic initiative. And this is part of their global dominance, their method of global dominance, and their national policy perspectives, political and strategic both. So they are achieving what they wanted to, and you, as you rightly said, yes, probably India will have to do something to not only politically but economically, and should there be a situation, strategically be in a situation to handle such a scenario. Yes, the initiative today in the Southeast Asian region, in the South Asian region, in the Indian Ocean region, in the Pacific East, has gone to the initiative has gone in the hands of China. And they have very suitably, very cleverly, probably pursued their national objectives.
Colonel Manjit sir, you have served in Sri Lanka as part of the IPKF contingent. Do you think this entire this bogey of the history of Tamil politics and this our IPKF bogey and the involvement of gradual our the overall relation with Sri Lanka has somewhere gone in a haywire that our enemy nation is taking full advantage of it. How do you react to this scenario?
China, in all its thinking and philosophy, as Colonel Dixit has brought out, considers itself as a middle kingdom. This is central to their ethos. Therefore, you would see neither did they align with the NATO bloc and the US, nor with the Russians or the Soviet bloc as it was known in the Cold War era, but they were a communist nation. But the ethos of a middle kingdom was brought out to us by a professor when we were at the NDA and attending the staff course. He said, remember two main constructs when you're always going to deal with China. One, it is a middle kingdom. It will always protect its own interests. It will have its own strategy. So you see all these bases coming up, which I shall come on to later, as part from flowing from there. Number two, he always said, is that China is a sleeping dragon. Keep that in mind. It will not venture into certain places which are not, which it historically does not consider its own, nor will it go into the offensive. Today, that may seem a step back. It may not seem to be true, but I think there has been a prodding from the NATO bloc, from the Western bloc. In our case, maybe I shall dwell on it a little later. If you look at China, in the days of Mao Zedong, it was in a survival mode. Then two incidents happened. One, the Soviet invasion into Afghanistan, and other economic crises in Soviet Union led to the breakdown of the Soviet Union. This, by the time Mao had gone and Li Peng had come in, and this leadership of China realized that without capitalism, they're going to go down the same path. So they merged a strategy or a policy wherein they would keep the communist and authoritarian regime going, but they would also bring in capitalism. Now, to bring in the economic power, they went in for what we are seeing today, is an encirclement. They have developed bases all over. And like was said earlier, colonization through debt. Like Colonel Dixit brought out, literal states surrounding India and the world over, even in Africa, they have gone in for soft power. They have developed things in Africa which was never even heard of. And the same thing they have followed here. They have come and they have encircled India, much like the strategy of the Japanese who had the string of pearls. They went on and conquered islands for which MacArthur had to then come in and reconquer. And those string of islands were their first line of defense. In this case, this encirclement is a projection of global power. They are not, today they are so economically well off that they can afford to project power and challenge the US. This is, in short, a summation of China so far. Also, as far as challenging the US is concerned, like Colonel Dixit said, the US is not going to go into a frontal, head-on, one-on-one challenge with them militarily. They will take them on economically. But there is one caveat. The 1% ruling elite of the world, US specifically, have invested in China. Their economic might, their financial empires run from that country. And therefore, it's going to be a huge dystopia if they try to take on. And obviously, it would not be well for the world. Coming specifically to Sri Lanka, if you recollect, Shashwat, when India took on the Sri Lankan, I'm not sounding nice, misadventure. It was a 30-month misadventure, which was a foreign policy-driven misadventure, wherein the Indian Army got involved at the insistence of RAW and the foreign policy, and we were just asked to do something without getting into the geostrategic significance of. At that time, it was felt that China may come in, Israel may come in. We have this ham-handed approach to a few things. We went in there, we got shot up. It's not like Vietnam, but it did bring a lot of blight to the fourth, to probably one of the best fighting armies in the world, the fourth largest. When we left, today you take a look at Sri Lanka, or in post-IPKF Sri Lanka, with the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, the entire umbilical cord from Tamil Nadu and India was cut, and Sri Lanka built up its resources in those 3 years that we were in Sri Lanka, and then took on the might of the LTTE and decimated them. So what did we gain, or what did the LTTE gain, or what did Sri Lanka gain? Today, if you look at a parallel, I would say look at the Palestinian state. If they don't have a two-state solution, which even the US President Joe Biden has said, there will never be peace in that land. We also went in for the two-state solution, a state of Ilam and a state of Sri Lanka, with a degree of autonomy that would have preempted all that has happened today, and China sitting, like someone has said, 150 odd kilometers from us. That said, by building bases, economic bases, they're still economic bases. They will move on gradually in time, as per Chinese perception, into military bases. Yes, is it a call for concern today? It is always a call for concern. But the red flags will go up when these bases walk or morph into military bases. We have the Chinese ships here, the Chinese thing. That is a time when we have to really go into a kind of a cautionary mode. As of now, we are just informed, we know things are happening, but we're not taking any steps against them. So once they move on to a military base, like the US has got 800 bases, that's the time when India would have to take some very concrete steps. I'm not sure, these are my personal views on the Quad, etc. One side you tell us Quad, next day you put a right of passage through the island or near the island, which is Indian sovereignty. We could do the same to Sri Lanka. I'm not even sure whether our EEZ extends to 200 kilometers. Then we may not even allow a military ship to come in.
12
And if we want to take a head-on approach like that, it's going to take some taking. And as a military man who's operated in Sri Lanka, been at fairly decent levels of exposure, I find our bureaucracy is always ham-handed. They're suspect of us. They never co-opt the army or the military thought process into any perspective, geostrategical, tactical, nothing. We're never involved. That's why you find a salami slicing taking place in China. You'll find now that we're going to face a Pakistani front, a war on the Chinese front, and then you'll find a sea battle happening in Sri Lanka in time to come. I'm not painting a gloomy picture, but somewhere along the line, this jointmanship, the theater commands have to come, etc. There has to be a degree of involvement of the military at the highest levels. We are not part of it at any time. Okay.
What do you make out of this situation as far as the threat to India's security and sovereignty is concerned? Because we have already seen a belligerent China on our eastern front. First Doklam, then your Galwan, and Tawang is always a flashpoint. And then we have Nathula, that side. And then we have the POK, which is always burning, and China has the one belt, one road passing through them, and the Chinese Pakistan economic corridor. And then they are investing in now they have been invited to participate in the Chabar port, which was supposed to be developed by India. And they are entering where India was there, by Iran. And that is not very far from Pakistan's Gwadar port. So my concern is, be it the waterways or be it the land, we are being surrounded from all sides. So what is India's options now? Where do we go from here?
Okay. This is basically my view. On the land frontier, that is the flashpoints that you have outlined, there will always be now some kind of give and take. They would occupy, we would occupy. You know, one of my favorite lines in most presentations to many people is that Britain, a nation of shopkeepers, they only furthered their economic interests. They never left India, Pakistan, and China with clear-cut borders. Today, those borders have become indefensible and flashpoints. We have to iron them out and therefore avoid any of these, as far as possible. The salami slicing, the give and take must take place on both sides. That's step one. Bring those confrontation points down to a minimal level. And if there is a violation, give back a bloody blow. We did that in Galwan. Hopefully, we'll do it everywhere else. So that takes care largely of your land corridors or your land borders. Coming on to this, encirclement. As of now, we are at the very basic steps. That is step one. The ports have been converted. They're economic ports. Step two, they would have to turn into military bases. That's the time when we need to put it down. We will have to go to the UN. We may have to take steps, like I said earlier, a military confrontation, something of that nature may take place on the line of the Cuban crisis. Somewhere the nation has to stand up, and we will have to probably tell our people. As far as the Pakistani ports are concerned, they are a matter of concern. They will cause us headache later. But what will really be a pain to us is the one in Sri Lanka, Hambantota. My view is keep a good watch on them. Let your fortress command be strengthened. That is the Andaman Fortress Command. Keep showing, like in the army, when we go on IS duty, we always have the flag marches before we have the actual IS duty when we go in for fire for, when we resort to firing. So there should be a show of force. We must express our anguish at all forums. we must also deal with China and tell them, listen, if you're going to do something here, then we're going to open up another front somewhere. So these are the kind of steps that we need to take. We may not go in for this, thing that we're being encircled. Yes, there is a move. China, I told you, is a middle kingdom. They're always going to look for power projection points for their bases, and that's what they're exactly doing. Our own little states, as Colonel Dixit pointed out, will always play their own game, one to the other. May I share that somewhere along the line, in my 40 years of global thought, or what we were exposed to, there seems to be a strategic overreach. China is not the US. It does not have the wherewithal to fund and take care of its 800 bases. What we are seeing today may be a part one of the strategy, economic bases. Let's get them on colonization through that, get the economic, the port into the area. Whether they'll convert it to a military base or not, we don't know. Whether they do have the wherewithal, we don't know. So we should wait and watch, but be wary. In the meantime, very forcefully involve good military minds at the highest levels, which our government does not do. Your economic power is your military power, period. If we are going to fight with World War II weapons, with half your formation strung along the borders, with no jointness, where any, I don't want to use any, Babu can stop your finance, your aids, they all must be co-opted. We need a serious rethink on this. We went in for post-Kargil for an integrated headquarters of MOD. There is nothing on ground being integrated. No MOD officer sits in our headquarters. None of them come to the forward areas. They do not have an idea. So don't think that I'm letting out my angst against the civilian bureaucracy. There are some fantastic officers. I call them the Kalyug minority. In any 100 odd people, there will always be 20, 30 people who work. That's the people whom we should target, bring them on, and move this nation forward, both economically and militarily.
I have a feeling that, like Manjit also said, that economic growth is a step forward, is the right step forward. And probably every country around you, whether it is these are small states around us, or whether they are big powers like US or even China, probably as long as we can prove our economic powers and we can ensure that we convince these countries that their economics interests are served very much by us, right? Uh, unless we do that, probably there may not be a way out. The biggest reason for the recent fallouts of between the two countries is that somewhere one country feels, somewhere probably China feels that their India is standing up to their economic interests. They're building their own economic aura around themselves, which might affect them. And probably these small military pockets or these small military issues were an effort to probably try and bring you down. But fortunately, they didn't succeed. So I have a feeling that the way forward, like anything that you perceive of China to be doing or anything you think that they might do in future has started from an economic growth plan. I mean, money invested in Sri Lanka, money invested in Nigeria, money invested in any country brings more jobs to the Chinese people, brings more money back to China. And as a part of this economic development, they gain administrative initiative into all these countries. They gain territorial integrity of into these countries. They develop administrative regions. It's like your airports closer to the border. Today they are all domestic airports. Tomorrow, if required, they will all be used for military purposes. So they are creating these for basically for economic development. But tomorrow, if the need arises, they'll use it for whatever they want to, because it is their area. They've spent money into it. And the countries which have given them way, they also realize that it is easier to get China rather than get funding from China, no matter what the future effects are, impacts are. It is easier to get in China rather than getting international US-centered funding organizations, which start peeping into your governance, into your method of governance, human rights, and other things, whereas China has no such conditions. So the development from China or the
Why is
investments
that?
from China come
So
easily.
why? What my
Now,
question is, why is that these countries are so dependent on China, where we talk about democracies? China is not a full-fledged democracy, and then it has a history of human right violations, be it Tiananmen Square or be it this Wuhan lab COVID virus
how does it
leak.
matter? How does it matter to Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka? How does it matter?
So doesn't this kind of image that we talk about of China
Well,
doesn't have any bearing vis-a-vis
irrespective
India?
of the image, like Manjit said earlier, all the companies from US and Europe set up bases in China. Their manufacturing units are in China.
I not that one wants to side with Dixit, but that's what seems to be. The overplaying of these democratic norms, human rights violation, etc. This is one of the ploys used by them. And I was not aware that what Colonel Dixit says, but the funding, you ask any African nation, today we are only talking about our, you ask any African nation, they have built corridors, railways, they've built stadiums, the likes of which are never seen everywhere by China. So they're using a soft power approach where they're needed. And what they do in their own land, other than a few international watchdogs talking up, even for that matter, they said India is a 142 on human indices. They said we are, which may also be true. But at the moment, we are focusing on a few things. We're still the pharmacy capital of the world. I mean, how
And where
does
is your image
Bihar
as a
not having?
country, India?
Yeah,
Where is the
sorry.
image
Yeah,
of India as a
yes,
country? We've taken a big beating all through.
yes,
So that good man image right from the beginning, non-aligned nation, etc., it hasn't helped.
true.
So what is I would like to have your concluding remarks regarding the road ahead for India, Colonel Dixit, starting with you.
I
What is
personally feel the
our
road ahead
what's the
is,
message?
do not worry what others are doing. What others are doing, just prepare yourself, look after your interest, look after your growth. And I will go to the extent of saying, like, you remember there were times when people used to say, "Arey, Pakistan to itne hathiyar kharida." Arey, Pakistan to kharidega hi hathiyar. If they treat you as their enemy, they will want to be prepared. But you be prepared that despite buying all those weapons, you are able to kick them the day you want to. So similarly, let people do what they do, because they will keep doing things which they think are part of their interest. And just by crying or just by howling in the international forums, you will not be able to stop them. The only way to stop them is keep growing, look after your interests, forget everything else, be economically strong, and let strategy, geopolitics, strategy, and like Manji said, military be a part of probably decision making, to as much as you make them accountable to national growth and development. So for whatever, if you make them accountable and responsible in some way of national growth and development in terms of security and providing a safe geographical area for economic development, give them the initiative, make them part of the decision making.
Colonel Manjit, sir, your afterword.
Uh, Create a set of fantastic business environs which were created from 90 to 2015. Even now they exist. It's just they've gone marginalized a bit. Recreate those environs. Let the citizen be accountable in some manner. Eminent citizens at various places holding people account. So we need a massive reform, which our healthcare system and other systems today lie exposed. So we must utilize this opportunity. Why we must utilize it? A better India, a progressive India, an equitable India, and an economically powerful India. Once that is in place, you would be able to take on the military aspects of your national power. They develop a port, so long as it economics only, we hold on to it. The minute it becomes, they turn it into a military port, China, anybody else, we do what the US did in the Cuban 1962 Bay of Pigs, or when the Russians were supposed to bring in, I stand corrected, when the Russians were supposed to bring in the missiles into Cuba, they cordoned off. We will cordon off. We have to take those kind of steps. We also should not get too worried about the encirclement that is taking place, their bases being developed, and we should avoid various confrontations till we are well prepared. That said, thank you, Jai Hind. I still believe we belong to a great, powerful, ancient civilization, all of us united together, and we shall go through this, achieve better, come out better.
Be cautious, but there is not too much cause for worry. Thank you, Shashwat. Thank you, Manjit.
Great talking.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
Wonderful hearing
Shashwat.
you.
So
Great
the
thoughts.
final word from both of you is that India must focus on its socio-economic and military growth to counter the growth of China around us.
All right.
And why China? Any other power in the world,
Anyway.
I would say. Why just China? Anywhere else? Let's try and be stronger than economically stronger than any power in the world, and then everything will fall into place.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your giving your precious time to uncovering India. We wish you all a very happy and healthy future ahead, and wishing both of you all the best. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Same to you.
Best of luck to the channel.
Bye.
Thank you.
All the
Uncover
best.
India. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.